the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Thanks for joining us today. It is 8 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast. It's July 17th, 2017. I'm super excited to have my guest join us today. It's been quite a while since we've gotten an update from St. Louis, and joining us today is Wendy Lumetta. Wendy, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us.
Good morning, Lonnie, and thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry that it's been so long, but I'm really glad that we're back on and talking about things that are important. So thank you again for giving a platform to St. Louis for the issues. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you for those kind words. For our new listeners, can you just kind of shortly summarize, instead of me doing it, why don't you, since you live there, shortly summarize what the big issue is in St. Louis? Because maybe we have new listeners who are not aware of what's happening in St. Louis.
That's a great idea. And in fact, I even just came to find out myself not too many years ago. So this is a good reminder for anyone that is listening to this for the first time, but it's never too late. Even if a situation has been going on or if it's a concern of yours, it's never too late. Today can be the day that you start. As it turns out, in 2013, I became aware of an EPA meeting that was being held locally. I had not followed the issue locally, although strangely I came to find out that it was something that was occurring right where I lived, which is near Coldwater Creek in North County in St. Louis. And to my definite surprise, and something that I think was actually probably, I don't want to say hidden from the public because there was some news about it, but it certainly wasn't common knowledge, and it was something that people weren't aware of. And that is that St. Louis is actually the first secret city, because in, I believe it was 1942, Mallinckrodt Chemical Works was commissioned to purify uranium in St. Louis for the World War II effort for the atomic bombs. In 1942, we began receiving the uranium from the Belgian Congo. This was extremely pure uranium to begin with. I believe somewhere in the 60% range, as opposed to the North American uranium that I believe never exceeds maybe more than 5 or 6%.
Wow.
So we're talking about an already extremely enriched product, and they brought it from Africa, from the Belgian Congo, over to St. Louis, and for decades, Mallinckrodt Chemical Works purified that uranium for the war effort. And after years and years and years, decades, there became a huge accumulation of nuclear waste. The nuclear waste obviously isn't as toxic as the purified uranium, but it certainly contains carcinogenic and very harmful things that don't ever need to be around people. Well, as it turns out, the workers had been specifically exposed, and then kind of by proxy, the area has been exposed because the nuclear waste, they started to accumulate so much of it on property at the downtown site that they eventually had to take a large portion of it and store it out by the airport, which is close to North County. And right next to where they stored it at the airport at two different locations, it leached into the water in a creek that ran through a residential area in North St. Louis County. So for decades, this leaching was occurring, and children were playing in the creek. And I found out that night at the EPA meeting in 2013 that many of my neighbors, friends, classmates, people that I knew from when I was growing up, all they were either passed away from cancer, they had a child or a relative that was sick from cancer, and there had been a very unusual number of odd immune-related and thyroid-related cases. All of these things can be directly attributed to exposure to ionizing radiation like that of the uranium processing waste that was leached into Coldwater Creek. At the time, I had no idea that I had been born with a birth defect, death in my right ear, and at age 31, I got a tumor called a pleomorphic adenoma. I had no idea these things would be connected in any way. I thought it was a complete fluke and one of those random things that just happens to people. Mm-hmm. And then I come to find out that people with birth defects and people with this specific type of tumor, again, can be directly attributed to the radioactive waste.
True.
So it's really hard not to form a direct connection between the two. So in 2013, I became a little more involved with the Coldwater Creek Just the Facts Please group because, as it turns out, one of the people from that group actually lived in my neighborhood. She was a couple years older than me, so we didn't know each other personally. But come to find out that she and another grade school mate of mine had started this group in part because of health issues that they both had. But the one woman's child was born with an incredibly rare brain tumor and eventually passed away from that.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I just can't tell you how rare that is. It just it almost never happens. And so the probability of all of the things added up, and that was when I decided that I was going to put forth effort to try to make this be something that people are certainly more aware of. I was totally unaware, and I blame myself for that because it was probably not happy news that I was looking forward to. It didn't have anything to do with the fun stuff happening on the weekend, so I probably sort of glossed over it. And I'm ashamed to say that it actually took me being personally involved before I became involved to be personally impacted, rather. Mm-hmm. So I really hope that people kind of take heed to that and realize that even if you're not sick and even if you're not the person being impacted, someone you love or someone you care about is.
That's right.
It's something that's affecting all of us. And then to find out the horrible legacy of St. Louis and St. Charles, which is the neighboring community to the west of the Missouri River, we actually have a large tomb of covered up radioactive waste in a cell that is it is estimated to be that its longevity will be 1,000 years, but the radioactive particles are going to live for tens of thousands of years and possibly millions of years. So I found out that the people that represent me in my own county temporized this very serious situation and didn't make it a permanent solution. So now I try to speak out every chance I get to say that these materials need to be removed from their present location. They don't belong anywhere near people or water or certainly children, and they need to be moved in a place where they're not ever going to impact those people. So the Foods Rat program in St. Louis is the program. It stands for the Formerly Utilized Sites Remedial Action Program. And for the last, I'm just going to say 20 years, they have been cleaning up the hot spots of St. Louis, the downtown location where Mallinckrodt originated, the St. Louis airport site, and then also the Hazelwood interim storage site, which is also where these radioactive waste materials were stored and buried, only to find out that the barrels that they were stored in were damaged and leaking, and it all leaked out and into the creek and into residential areas.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have a question to ask you. When they first buried this, did the government know? I mean, like, was the government aware? Like, who was watching over Mallinckrodt as they were doing this? Like, whose responsibility was it to guard over this to make sure it did not get into public exposure?
Well, I don't know that. Excuse me, Lonnie. I'm sorry. I don't know that was ever anybody's job because it happened. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
That's all right. God bless you.
Actually, if you read back into some of the history of the Manhattan Project, Robert Oppenheimer was the head physicist, and even he would make sure that some of the different scientists wouldn't know about some of the other factions that the other scientists themselves were working on. This was a top secret project. We were trying to beat the Germans in the war, and we wanted to be the first ones with nuclear, capabilities. And so it was all very much secretive. That was just part of the war. We didn't want to, have anybody, loose lips, sink ships type of thing. So people genuinely didn't know. And I truly had absolutely no idea. I'm certain my parents didn't know, or they would have never, moved us out there. I believe that a lot of people that were already engaged with knowledge of the situation probably became aware locally due to an expose article series that was written by the Post-Dispatch in 1989. Well, I was 18 years old at the time, and I really wasn't thinking about the environment very much. I was thinking about goofing off and having fun. But as it turns out, there was a series in our local paper that really exposed it and really brought it to the forefront. And then I think you also know Mrs. Kay Dry, who has spent her lifetime working for environmental causes in Missouri. And her husband have a beautiful legacy of being the largest landowners in Missouri's history. And she has done so much for the community and for speaking out against these polluters and trying to get people to become engaged. And she's a lovely and wonderful person. I give her all the credit in the world for doing all she can. And it boils down to we need more people to be involved. We need more people to care about what's happening in the environment so that we can affect changes. Our political representatives have become too passive, and it's been something that they've been allowed to push off administration after administration, and that's why decades go by and nothing gets done. So I forget who said it first, but someone once said that we lack the political will. Well, the people are the ones that create the political will. So I'm hoping that between this show and other methods of exposure and people talking about it, that enough people will care and enough people will get involved that we can all collectively come together and say, you know what, as a community, we've had enough. It is actually the responsibility of the federal government to take care of these things. And because of some legal loopholes, they've been able to evade responsibility from parts of it. And We just can't accept that passively. We have to actively speak up, tell them that this is their problem that they need to fix, and then hold them to task. So,
yeah, and especially right now, we really, all of us need to call our elected officials and at the House and tell them no to H.R. 3053, which is the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 2017. Are you aware of this?
I've read just a little thing about it, but if you could repeat that, I'm going to write it down.
This is such an egregious act. Basically what they're going to do is privatize the nuclear waste. And it's going to eliminate federal, state, and local rights over water. It will eliminate local and state rights over air and other utilities. It eliminates environmental impact reports for nuclear waste. It eliminates congressional oversight of nuclear waste. It eliminates the necessity for safety studies for transporting these nuclear casks, like the waste casks, like they could drive a leaking, contaminated canister through your town and you would not know about it. The other thing that it does is it immediately starts paying the licensees money, whether they have nuclear waste or not. That's just the short list. And literally, it is being sold as a streamlined way to cut down on billions of dollars in the nuclear waste program through Congress. And we really must. It got passed out of committee based on the idea that this is a way for the government to save money. It is really an egregious account of irresponsibility. I mean, it is the denouement.
Deplorable.
Yes, it is deplorable. Yes.
This is a huge problem with our legislature because as much as we want to be fiscally responsible, we don't want another Flint, Michigan on our hands. We don't want businessmen to make the decisions that scientists should be making. And this is actually something across the board in politics. People really need to get a grip and figure out who they want to be making the decisions about the health of themselves and their family. I certainly don't want a businessman to do that. This just kind of highlights so many things that are wrong with our political system right now. It every day just feels like an assault.
Yes.
Would you be repeating the number for that House bill? Because I'll be making my phone calls when we're done here.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, you know where you can go to Donna Gilmore's page, www.sanonofresafety.org, SANONOFRE safety.org. It's HR 3053. It's called the Nuclear Waste Policy Amendment Act of 2017. It got voted out of committee. It is going to be voted on, according to Donna. She's been following this very closely in August. So she has handouts. She has a sample letter. There is a long list of anti-nuke activist organizations that have written letters to Congress to say, please do not pass this bill. This will be an egregious assault on our country. And it is an egregious assault on our country. But when we think about who is heading the Department of Energy, Rick Perry, he oversaw the largest nuclear waste spill in Texas. He did not get reelected in Texas, and right after he lost his election, he got a position on the board of the company who spilled the nuclear waste. It's stunning. And when Hanford happened, that collapse of the tunnels, the 300 of an 1,800-foot length tunnel collapsed, which they now have said that whole tunnel is going to collapse. It's collapsing. He literally said, well, we had no idea this was happening. He has no idea what's going on. That company, they have been told since 1980 that those walls were collapsing. They were losing their integrity, something severe. They have been told repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly by the government to fix it. But again, because of the Price-Anderson Act, they can ignore it, pay a minimum penalty. Oh, that's another thing that the HR 3053 does. They're allowed to pay a one-time fee to the government and then be held not liable for any other damage after that. So they're going to pay a one-time fee. And this is really why I think this is why it's important that you and I, and we get people who, for one reason or another, have decided like this. You and I are like most Americans, Wendy. We went about our lives. When you talk about when you were 18, when all this was coming out, like you weren't paying attention. We were really, really convinced by our legislators that we had honest. Yes, we might have had some greedy legislators in D.C. who funneled the money to their own families and to their own friends, but fundamentally, they were looking after the best and the health of the people of America. We believed that. I mean, we bought it hook, line, and sinker. And St. Louis, in my view, is a bird's eye view of how all of American politics have been subverted. Because in St. Louis, there are factions who have the same issues. They're all contaminated by nuclear waste. But they're not talking to each other because of one thing or another, because of the way the big money has been able to meddle and cause dysfunction within people who ought to be getting along. We have elected officials who turn a blind eye. Like they literally act like it is not happening in St. Louis. It's stunning. There's no conversation about it.
They are financially incentivized to do so. They're paid by the polluters to de-emphasize it, to downplay it, to make it sound like we're all a bunch of crazy environmentalists. No, we just want clean air and clean water that doesn't have cancer-causing particles in it. I don't think that's too much to ask. And just the idea that this House Bill 3053 would give them carte blanche to do so many terrible things. I'm outraged. I'll be reading about this and on the phone before the morning is up because this is crazy.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'll tell you what. And Donna said that the way they wrote the bill, it was written by the nuclear industry. The way they wrote it, it is not a clear bill. It took her 2 days. She had to really read through it because they were like, the legalese was just intense. Insert that, delete this, insert that. And it wasn't like they were saying exactly what they were doing. She had to disseminate it. So you can't just go to the bill and read it through and understand exactly what they're inserting and deleting. That's the thing. They talk about it, but they don't tell you what they're deleting. And this is where our elected officials get led astray because they go on what they're told. They don't have time to read all this legislation. So they're told that it's just the other thing that's happening, and you live in St. Louis, so you probably guys get this firsthand. There's a major push to convince us that nuclear waste is just not that bad. I read a story that said tritium isn't that harmful in the water.
Probably not written by somebody that was exposed to it. I really believe that a lot of that is a direct push from the nuclear industry. I know that there is a fake lobbying group that is being directly paid by the people that would be financially responsible for the cleanup. This is not the way that politics should work. It's almost as insulting as having to watch the same commercial over and over and over again for the same politicians. Why do they get to spend that money when that's just not right? There's something that the people need to take back the control. We've been able to, kind of temporize and just go along with the situation. Enough is enough. We need to take more definitive action. That's why I have a lot of respect for a lot of these young people that are really, taking it upon themselves to say, you know what, I'm not going to be convinced. I'm going to do some peaceful resistance. No one is interested in harming other people, with the exception of the people that are poisoning our environment. Those are the people that are hurting us.
Yeah.
The people that are the passive resistors are doing all of us a beautiful favor by putting themselves out there, by being willing to physically put themselves in the way of these, trucks and things that are transporting hazardous materials. I have so much credit and appreciate the bravery of these young people. And all I can say is thank you so much and keep it coming because it is making a difference. It is putting it in the news. It's putting it in people's thoughts and minds, and I have all the hope in the world for our millennials that are really bringing this around.
And just refusing. I agree. And you know what's really, this is almost like another part of the crime, though, is the way that this came out on The Intercept. They were talking about the water protectors in North Dakota, and they did, I forget the lady's name that they were interviewing, but they got a hold of some of the documents between the company and the police force. They hired a private police force to work with the local police force. And what was shocking was the communication between them. They were literally referring to the water protectors as terrorists, as extremists, instead of and maligning them and saying that they were violent and inciting the local police to be afraid of these people. And this is the power of big money, very much like I believe I've seen as an outsider. What's happened in St. Louis is there are agitators that come in and misrepresent things and create dissension among people who really ought to be working together. You know, the story, it's a tender topic, but the story of the buyout that failed in St. Louis, I don't know if people are aware of this, but there was legislation where there was a very small circle of homes that they wanted to get bought out, which was killed which again is another stunning thing, is that it was just killed and left to go by the wayside. There was no legislator that picked it up and said, okay, this bill sucks. It's got a lot of inadequacies, but let's rework it. You know what I mean? Like there's no effort to remediate or help or save the lives of the people that are directly affected by this. And let's be clear, this is an ongoing nuclear contamination situation in St. Louis. This has not been stopped. Am I correct? It's still going.
Oh, not only is it still going, excuse me, not only is it still going, but the thing that you're referring to is not just nuclear contamination, but it's also airborne toxic particles of which the EPA has never fully characterized. They've never tested it all. So we literally do not know what is in it. So
oh my God.
when legislators try to combine issues and then try to say, okay, we're going to have one blanket fix for all of these things, well, that's not really the appropriate thing to do, in my opinion, because the people that need to be away from the toxic air pollution, that's something that needs to happen right now. The nuclear waste that is currently being cleaned up in St. Louis by the Sewage Rat program, that has been happening for over 20 years. And it's a slower and methodical process because they do it in a scientifically accurate way, in that they find a spot that contains the radiation, and then they work from an area of greater concentration to an area of lesser concentration until it doesn't exist anymore. The EPA has essentially never used sound science to characterize the site that has both the radioactive material and the toxic chemicals that are coming off of it. So for the EPA to make any assertion that it is safe or that it's not harmful, it's simply not true. They have never tested it, so they don't know what it is. And furthermore, when they publish their propaganda about it, they say things like, well, there hasn't been any short-term harm. Well, what about the fact that it's been burning for 7 years? You should have long-term information because it's been burning for 7 years. And I think if you look at that, you see that it is harmful because we have a terrible air quality problem in St. Louis. And these people are able to bypass this. And I can only assume it's because of money and political manipulation. All of our politicians are pretty much whores for money, and whatever their voting price is, that's what they'll accept to say whatever the person wants. So we really have a corrupt system right now that people need to be involved, they need to be engaged, they need to read about these bills and be involved, make the calls, go to the demonstrations.
That's right. Pay attention. But I do have to defend sex workers. I think that calling politicians whores for money gives sex workers a bad name. I think sex workers actually have more integrity than politicians. But that's an aside.
I don't doubt that at all. At least they're honest when they screw you over. But anyway.
Exactly.
I don't even mean to be degrading the sex workers. You're absolutely right. I think they are more honest too.
Yes. So I have a question to ask you about the Trump administration, because when we last talked was several months ago, before we got the full flavor of what this guy is about. How are people responding to the cuts to the EPA? Is that affecting the programs in St. Louis?
It's really difficult to say, only because the issue in St. Louis that the EPA has legislation over. They have never, done it correctly. So to say that, are they doing it, less so now? See, they've had, the site for 27 years and they've never even tested it. And, to me, to understand what types of things would be harmful, to test it would be the very first thing you would do. And instead, they have found excuse after excuse, reason after reason to appease the people that would be financially responsible for doing it. So, in my opinion, the EPA has been completely ineffective in St. Louis because they have literally managed the entire issue with public relations by telling people, well, it's bad, but it's not that bad, or, it could be, it's not going to make you sick unless you stand over it. Well, what if you stand over it for 7 years and it's right on top of you? They them pacifying us by telling us there's nothing to worry about is about as ridiculous as them telling the people at the Animas River that when it turned orange that it was perfectly safe. Anybody with eyes can easily observe. It's not. It's, that they're kind of saying to us, what are you going to believe? What we tell you or your lying eyes? No, we know that it's harmful. We see. Besides that, there have been enough independent studies. There has been enough information. We know that the radioactive waste has been found inside of people's homes. This is something that should never have been allowed to happen, and it's because of their serious neglect of the situation that's even brought us to this situation. So I essentially have no confidence in the EPA at all.
And what about now the Army Corps of Engineers? Let's be clear to sort of separate. This took me a little while to understand. The EPA oversees one portion of the cleanup, and the Army Corps of Engineers has been overseeing another one, and they've been working on it for a very long time, and they've done a very effective job. That's correct, right?
That's exactly right. In fact, it should be the Army Corps of Engineers' job because they are the people that remove radioactive waste from areas. That's their job. So the duplication of government processes is another huge thing that I have a problem with. And to even say that the EPA has been cleaning it up is a misnomer. They haven't even tested it, let alone cleaned it up. The Army Corps of Engineers has been taxed by the federal government because when the government said, we're going to process uranium and we're going to make these war materials, these things will always belong to us because we commissioned them, because it's the property of the federal government. Now, the federal government was able to use a legal loophole because some of the waste that came from the area where there was the known nuclear contamination was illegally dumped into a landfill. And because it was illegally dumped, now it's no longer a matter for the Corps of Engineers, and now the EPA has it because of that legal loophole. To me, that's just criminal right there. No, there should only be one government faction that is in charge of the cleanup of the nuclear waste, and that is the Army Corps of Engineers SUSREP program. So for the EPA to even be involved is inappropriate. But if they are going to be involved, then for God's sake, at least test it appropriately, and they still haven't. And then they just constantly put out this PR and these newsletters that say, oh, it's okay, it's okay. Well, no, it isn't, or else the SUSREP program wouldn't be cleaning it up out of St. Louis all over the place. It's I think that they're doing a terrible, injustice to the people that live around there. It's certainly not their fault that the nuclear waste was illegally dumped, and it shouldn't allow them to have an out in terms of responsibility. It doesn't matter if it's illegally dumped or not. It's still the process. It's still the property of the U.S. government. You still used it for wartime, and it's, still yours. So that is one huge problem. But I don't know that it's ever going to necessarily change hands the way that it needs to, because of a large push of lobbyists that want it to remain with the EPA, because it will ultimately be cheaper because they haven't been forced to do anything for 27 years. Certainly anytime you remove something that's dangerous, it's going to be more expensive than if you just left it there. But just leaving it there is not an option. It's not healthy. It's not good for people or kids. Even in St. Charles, where this big tomb is, it's only estimated to last for 1,000 years, although the isotopes are guaranteed to last, tens and hundreds of thousands of years. So how did temporizing it for 1,000 years help anyone? It only helps in the here and now. It doesn't help, mankind. It doesn't help the future, children, grandchildren. It just kind of, putting a Band-Aid on a pumping arterial bleed just is not cutting it anymore. We need to get more people involved, get more independence. That's another thing I wanted to mention, because the EPA has purposely been allowed to use a lab that has been known to falsify documents in favor of polluters. It just can't happen. Absolutely. And they still use it, and they still defend it. And this is something that just, anybody with any amount of ethics at all should know that that's just as inappropriate as you can get. If a company is going to falsify documents in favor, then that company should never be used again under any circumstances. It doesn't matter. They
should be shut down. They should not be allowed to do that. It does sound like Flint, Michigan, only on a much grander scale, frankly. It does. This whole, the cascading of events, as you've repeated them today, sound very much like what's gone on in Flint, Michigan. I mean, and
then the people in Flint still have poison water. They know it.
What does Claire McCaskill say? She's a very progressive, or so-called progressive senator. She has a lot of political power, doesn't she, in St. Louis? She could move and shake this if she wanted.
Well, except that she is a Democrat, and we certainly know that the Republicans are ruling the roost right now. But she has to, this is my opinion, it seems as though she is picking and choosing her battles, and she's doing it according to who is paying her the most, which is consistent with the way other politicians do their thing. Claire also makes a lot of claims about being number 50, like there's 100 senators and leaning to the right and to the left, but she's right in the middle. So she's attempting to make herself sound impartial to partisan politics, but the reality is the left side and the right side are wings of the same bird. And, I just don't have a lot of confidence in any partisan politics these days. Actually, politics in general, it's a mockery. It's a show. And then for people to continue to support Mr. Fake Time magazine, I'm literally stunned every day. I don't understand how people can accept the fact that a pathological liar is our leader-in-chief. If he were to have any other job within the military, he would already be court-martialed for conduct unbecoming. He's completely inappropriate, unprofessional, unpresidential, and frankly, I don't even understand people that say that he got this position because he's a good businessman. Good businessmen don't go bankrupt. Good businessmen
4 times.
Don't screw people over. He's a terrible businessman. He's a for anyone who has ever seen the movie Network, I'm constantly reminded of the similarities of, here's this person possibly mentally ill, maybe having a breakdown, but it makes great TV, and that's all they care about. It's just, I feel like I'm living in some kind of alternate universe or something where nothing I believed is real. the rights being taken away from women, the rights being taken away from minorities, and now Trump's latest, I thought this was a joke. I thought it was something out of The Onion or something until it turns out that it was true. His wall to the south, the Mexican border wall, his suggestion is that we make it a solar panel. Even that probably isn't a bad idea, but that we make it clear so that people will be able to see the bags of drugs that get chucked over the wall so that they don't get hit with them. I'm serious. This is something that Trump said, and I'm kind of like, first of all, I'm not aware of any incident of that. I don't know that that's ever happened. The second of all, to even say it is like the most ridiculous thing I've ever. It's hard to come up with the most ridiculous thing because every day you have to ask yourself. I'm constantly stunned. And then what's even more baffling is the people that continue to defend him. I do not understand it. I can't understand. I don't know what they're looking at. They have blinders on, and they're not seeing that his,
the nepotism. I mean, this last weekend, his lawyer actually defended his assault on women and said his sexual harassment claims are his First Amendment rights. They actually literally, they said that collusion is not a crime with the Russians. It's not a crime to collude with the Russians. I mean, they are really literally, this is a test of the Republican Party who is in charge, in my view. I mean, they are either banana Republicans or they are Americans, because this is how you turn a country into a banana republic state. Oh, he's not alone in his quest to subvert American Constitution, our American Constitution. And St. Louis is a bird's eye view of how they can all just ignore a catastrophic event because the people that are controlling them and paying for them to be in office tell them to ignore it. And that's called a banana republic. That really is a quasi-fascist state. I mean, next they're going to demand we call him El Presidente. I say that he's Pinochet 2.0. And it is really important, really seriously, we must make the toxic pollutants, this EPA thing, the fact that we have cities in America, across America, that are being, in fact, his own state, New York City, has nuclear pollution pouring into the Hudson River nonstop, tritium at least 66,000 times higher than what the EPA allows. So this is the shocking part, is that Americans as a whole, I mean, you probably come across this in St. Louis when you're talking to people about the nuclear pollution. Their eyes just kind of glaze over and it's not that bad and you have to die of something. The acceptance of nuclear death is something that my goal is to shake people out of that and have them demand, you know what? We have a right to a healthy life. We have a right to our Constitution gives us the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And as John Goffman said, the nuclear program has taken that away from us. And that's where we need to start, is on our rights. And this is why I'm big about community rights. In fact, tonight I'm going to a meeting for community rights, Lane County. There's a big push here. We are working on getting our own Bill of Rights in the city of Lane, in the county of Lane County, and we're going to submit it to the Oregon Constitution, and that way we can fend off the new polluters. In our county, there, right next door, in our next county over, there is a fuse wrap site that from World War II by ATI that very few people know about. And so it's probably like you. Like, how many people would you say, you've been doing this for at least 3 or 4 or 5 years that I know of? How many people that you have connected with are actually beginning to really take it seriously? Or have you seen sort of like a turning away from the idea?
Well, I haven't seen a turning away, but I haven't seen the embracing and concern of the situation like what I had hoped. And that's what I was going back to earlier, is that sometimes it actually takes people to be personally affected by something before it enables action, which is unfortunate, but that's also kind of part of human nature. I wish that it weren't so, but when you consider other things, like, for instance, gay rights. I personally am not gay. I'm married to a man, but I realize that gay people are people too, and they deserve rights the same way that everyone deserves rights. They're tax-paying citizens. They're, whether what they choose to do on their private time doesn't affect me one iota. So when people try to take rights away from these people, whether I fit that description or not isn't the point. The point is people are having their rights taken away inappropriately, and we need to stand up for that. So whether people are being impacted by this radioactive waste or not, for one thing, the fact is they probably are, and they just don't realize it because it's odorless, colorless, and you don't know when it's around. But it's something that everyone should be involved with, whether or not they feel that they've been personally impacted, because it's something that's going to speak to the state of health of our Earth in the future. So therefore, everyone needs to be involved. It's just, I don't know how to get people to be involved. Well, another thing that I wanted to add on to what you were saying earlier is that in St. Louis, interestingly enough, it's also the home of Anheuser-Busch, or InBev, which, keeps people alcoholic. And, maybe that is a way that people locally are dealing with this, because they know that, as one person, they can't affect change. So what can they do? Self-medicate to make themselves, forget for a while or something. So I think it's interesting that the largest brewery also happens to be the home of the nuclear hotspot.
Well, don't they use the water from the Missouri River?
From the Mississippi River, absolutely.
Yeah, so I wonder if there has been a push by anybody to have them test their water for radioactivity in the Mississippi.
I've been asking them for years, maybe decades. So,
really?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there just isn't enough of that political will, like I was talking about, to make it happen. It's for her to say, there's these carcinogens in the water, you guys should really test it. And then for people to say, you know what, nah, it's really not that bad. And there's so much water going down through there. That's sort of an aggravation to me, is that the EPA has their solution to pollution is dilution. Yeah. And that's not an appropriate way to think about it. If you were to have 2 glasses of water in front of you and you knew that one glass had a particle that, could potentially cause cancer, you would opt for the one that wouldn't cause cancer. So why are they making people choose the water that, that is bad? It's because not enough people are angry. Not enough people have the will. Not even just the will. Not enough people have the time. They're doing things like working to support their family and, keeping food on the table and, doing things that we need to do to continue life in America the way that it is. But too many people
I also
don't
think,
realize.
Wendy, I also think that the polluters pay a lot of money to put out the narrative that anybody that is freaked out about nuclear pollution is considered just a radical environmentalist. Like, there's many stories that I see online that I comment on where they make comments about, these environmentalists who are afraid of nuclear pollution because everyone knows that if it's diluted enough, it's just not harmful, which is a complete lie against science. But again, it's the same thing happening in St. Louis. Is the polluters, Republic Services, that isn't his name Don Slater, who owns Republic Services? I mean, they get to say whatever they want, and there is no pushback because we don't. It's kind of like in St. Louis, there are some really great protests going on. There are, so much water. That is a young activist group. Alex Cohen and his group they have chained themselves. I saw pictures. They have chained themselves to literally equipment and things like that to stop things from happening. And yet, honestly, it does not make national news. Nobody hears about it. I mean, we have tens of thousands of people in the street over the weekend. There was a protest in Los Angeles that was quite big and an anti-deregulate. It wasn't an anti-Trump thing, but it was really about stop the deregulation, stop harming us. And nobody heard about it.
Well, I can only just keep on trying to have hope and move forward. Actually, when you said the owner of Republic Services, actually the major stockholder is Bill Gates. So he is the one that actually kind of holds the purse strings.
Well, isn't he also pushing that new plutonium thing, like where he wants to use plutonium. He wants to build these plants where the uranium is enriched inside the plants, which is people forget that the reason that doesn't happen is it's extremely dangerous. I mean, he really is. Bill Gates is completely off his rocker. He really believes that nuclear pollution is just not that harmful. He really believes that we can bioengineer the human body to accept nuclear pollution.
Well, there's that. But I think that maybe what his real motivation is that he sees that there is a problem with all of this nuclear waste that's just, there's nowhere to go with it. It's just growing and growing. And I think he wants to try to capitalize on any money to be made off of it. That's what I think.
Yeah, I don't know. You're probably exactly right.
Well, that's another thing is you literally can't believe anything that anyone says anymore because lies are just so frequently, fake Time magazine covers made and all this. I don't understand how this culture of lies has gained so much momentum in that it feels like somebody just saying something, well, I said it, therefore it must be true. No, that doesn't make it true at all. It's, preposterous to think that just because someone says something that makes it true. So we really need to, start to clarify in our own minds if this person is known to, not be truthful, then it's probably representative of their character overall, and they're probably not a trustworthy person. So
pretty much that sums it up pretty well there, But then again, let's remember that the CIA paid El Mercurio, which was the newspaper in Chile, over $1 million. And this was in 1973 terms, $1 million. They paid that newspaper $1 million to sell Pinochet to the Chilean people. The CIA, our own government, did this. So it goes deep. We have no idea really how all the confusion, it's just pure gaslighting. But Americans are not babies anymore. We have a responsibility to wake up and be responsible and dig into the information and look at the resources. Read many of the documents are readily available. Again, I will remind people to go to Donna Gilmore's website at santanofresafety.org and just type in HR. It's right on her front page, but if you go to Google and type in HR 3053, it's the 3053 Nuclear Waste Policy Amendment Act of 2017. I believe that this is probably the most critical piece of legislation that we have to kill.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
It will affect every single city that has a problem with nuclear waste, and many cities have. Frankly, St. Louis's problem is tantamount, I believe, to as large as the WIP and as critical as Hanford, because what's going on in St. Louis has been going on for so long, and the negligence of, and frankly, they built homes around these sites. At the time when the builders were building homes around these sites, they did not know. It was a secret program. Nobody told them that there was nuclear waste in the neighborhoods where they were building homes. I read a story that said there are 300,000 people within 5 miles. Is that correct?
I don't know, but that actually nothing surprises me anymore. So it just becomes another sad statistic. I'm not surprised. Even one person being exposed to this is one person too many. The government should know that they didn't handle it correctly, and they have the opportunity now to do it. And so the only, excuse would be because they don't mind if people get killed this way. It's incomprehensible to me to understand that there is a level of acceptable human death associated with this. I can't accept that, and I won't. And that's why every single day I'm going to make my phone calls. And, also it's really important. I want to say this too. being an armchair advocate is wonderful, and making these phone calls is wonderful, and it is helpful. But we need people to do even more. Get out of that armchair. Go to the meetings like the ones that you were talking about. Organize your friends, your neighbors, your families, and collectively make a statement regarding what it is that is affecting you. Certainly in St. Louis, we have a couple of things that are outrageous. The nuclear thing is absolutely, in my opinion, the biggest one, because you can't see it, hear it, smell it. We need to get on board and make sure that these toxic things that are harmful to humans leave, and we should absolutely embrace technology that will never bring them back. Nuclear is a thing of the past. We got to let it go.
I agree, Wendy. And in that point, I'm going to make another plug for CELDF, CELDF.org, Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. I interviewed Kai on our show last Tuesday, and this is the community rights. They defend communities who have been offended by polluters. But one of the things they realized is that the reason that corporations can get over and there's no regard for human health, like in St. Louis, is you do not have a Bill of Rights. St. Louis, your areas do not have a Bill of Rights. You cannot assert, you are subordinate to the state, you are subordinate to the feds, and subordinate to the corporations, who all have equal legal standing. Corporations have a legal right in our country to make a profit, and a profit over the health of human life, unless we get our community rights asserted, which is why I'm going to work for Lane County to get our community rights asserted. I believe that this is it's kind of like women's rights and freeing the slaves. Getting community rights in every community is the only way we're going to push back against the corporate polluters. And I hope that people will embrace that. Go to CELDF.org, CELDF.org, and learn about it. Look under community rights, and there are groups. They will help you organize. They will help you build coalitions. And really, I believe 100% that's our way out, because we live in a system that does follow a certain procedure. And as we know, it's the procedures that keeps polluting people and killing people. So Wendy, I want to thank you for joining us. My goodness, I am delighted to have you back with us. I hope you'll come back in another 4 to 6 weeks and update us. There was a lot left on the table that we really didn't get a chance to discuss. So I hope that we can come back and share this information again. So my goal is to get people active. With this radio show, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm not interested in freaking people out at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm interested in getting them engaged and making them realize that their voice does matter. We do have power. We do have an ability to make things improve. We can make it work, but it takes us.
We've got the power, Lonnie, and you are quite the Wonder Woman.
Well, I really rely on everybody else who actually really understands the issue. I'm hopefully just an ear and a voice, and these airwaves. I thank Jules for giving us this venue, because our producer has allowed this show to be on the air without filtration, and that's a unique thing, especially in the getting out the truth about nuclear. So thank you, Wendy. I want to thank everyone for listening to us. You've been listening to Lonnie Clark. This is Wendy Lumetta, who is a citizen activist in St. Louis. And I encourage people to put your courage feet on. Please take action. And Wendy, thank you so much for joining us again.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is great. And we will talk to you guys tomorrow. I am really serious. Go to CELDF, go to SantaNofreeSafety.org. Take action. It's up to us, you guys. Take care.
Aussie Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.